So through the plumbing, we not only have connectors to look into and learn about the enterprise, but also tap into the various channels, right? Whether it's a data in motion, which is an email a connector, or looking at data at rest. For example, a lot of our customers are Microsoft 365 customers, so looking at data at rest in SharePoint. And then the knowledge graph is basically the what we know about the enterprise, the various organizations that it deals with, the people that it deals with. Different segments will have different volumes. So if you're talking B2C, we're talking about millions of customers that this particular enterprise might be dealing with. We learn about the employees, the identities and entities connecting to their enterprise identity directory, for instance, learning about the groups, because a lot of enterprises do access control to data and applications through groups. So learning about groups and what comprises those groups is also an important aspect. And then the fourth section is basically about just doing operational stuff within the application itself. So those are the four sections. And let me dive deeper into the connector. So this is where we get started, right? So any typical enterprise customer would first onboard us by helping us connect to their identity directories, for example, right, through Entra. Right, a lot of our Microsoft 365 customers have most of their users and employees, guest users or employees in their identity directory. So that's where we connect to. And then we start connecting to other learning sources. For example, we learn about their customers through the CRM system. So Salesforce is one that we support. We have support for other CRMs such as HubSpot as well. So this is the from a broad scope. So this is the IAM where we learn about employees. This is the CRM where we learn about the customers. And then we talk about, and by the way, through CRM, you're not just learning about customers, but also a lot of these connectors happen to be both a learning connector as well as an analysis connector. What I mean by that is we use that connector to learn about the enterprise, but also looking at the content. For example, in Salesforce, we're talking about cases that their customers are raising, support tickets, comments in those. So all of that is interesting to us because sensitive data might leak the organization through any of those channels, right? And then there are data in motion connectors, such as, for example, the 365 mail, where we are looking at emails in real time, SMTP server, where we are looking at emails that are being managed by SMTP servers as a standard in real time as well. SharePoint is where the data lives at rest, right? So we are able to connect to pretty much all of the sites, the SharePoint sites. We can go at an individual OneDrive level and look at data, various folders, and all of that. And what's interesting in all of this, as we are doing this, we are keeping the access model in view as well. What that means is when we're learning about a document in SharePoint, we are also aware of who has access at what level, at what privilege level to the document. And as and when those things change, we are able to determine the risk, not just from a data content point of view, but also access control point of view as well. And that's where the whole thing about content management, meeting contexts, in this case, for example, access control, comes into the picture. So those are the connectors, sort of learning as well as looking at data at rest and data in motion. And then we're talking about policies. So this is where, you're applying your specific requirements from an enterprise customer point of view, where I would say the enterprise knowledge or the business knowledge meets business logic, right? From a risk point of view. So obviously you are able to look at things such as, how you're looking at risk from a customer trust point of view, right? Are you looking at mixing customer information? So if you are, let's say, in healthcare, it's very, very important that you're not leaking the information about one customer to another customer, right? So you can design those policies as a requirement and look at a category of risk such as customer risk, customer trust, which is not possible if you just look at content and look at just the risk associated with, let's say, PII, because at that point in time, you're not aware of the relationships that you should consider when you're analyzing for risk, right? So That's where the policies come in. Pausing there for a second and see if you have any questions.
I'm not sure. So, like, looking at the policies,
Mhm,
when you mentioned that you could see
mhm.
if a user has, access to it, or a group or a role has access to it, can you then go, straight from like the policies, or at least the solution, and make the correction, and then it updates it, in Azure or AWS, whatever it might be?
Yeah, so that's the beauty of it, right? So we, as I forgot to mention, but there is an automation piece where we can actually automate some of the remediations that we believe should be available out of the box to customers. So, for example, if we find that a document has risky content, then
Mm.
not only we can provide automation to notify the right folks, but also provide access control through automations where we can go and set sensitivity labels, for example. In this case, now that we are able to determine the risk of a particular document in context of not just the PII, for example, but also relationship based risks such as customer trust issues or intellectual property leakage because you're sending a piece of content to a customer who does not have NDA. So now we can set sensitivity labels in Purview given that knowledge. We can also revoke certain access controls. So, for example, if we're looking at Salesforce, for example, we can go reach out into the Salesforce environment in cloud and make changes to the access control of a given piece of asset in Salesforce. So absolutely not just detecting risk, but also providing automated remediations based on the risk that is assessed so that customers can go and make certain controls and changes to those in those sources as well.
Is it also making like recommendations of what to change? Because, I'm trying to think of like how this compares to, like, let's just say Purview, for instance, right? Because I feel like that's probably what everyone would ask when they're looking at a solution like this. Well, why don't I just go with Purview, right? And how does this, offer me more capability than Purview, and this and that, right? So that's just where I'm approaching it from, what I'm thinking of.
Absolutely. So, and this is what I alluded to a little while ago, that Purview obviously can look at data, like can look at documents in SharePoint, look at based on their static policies and based on regular expressions that you can have in their DLP policies, looking at for example passport format or credit card format or social security numbers and all of that. So it can absolutely detect those risks in the Microsoft ecosystem, right? What it cannot do is basically look at that risk in context of, let's say, if this, for example, if I'm sending an email to a customer and I'm sharing some sensitive information in the email, it can be going to a customer with whom I have NDA. So it is absolutely fine for me to send that level of information. What Purview will do is it will detect that sensitive information is leaving the organization and flag it as a risk, right? What we'll do is, hey, we do detect some sensitive information leaving the organization, but it is going to a customer who we know about through the discovery that we had from Salesforce, and our accessibility to the various attributes that that customer has in our system. And we know that we have an NDA with that customer. So putting those things together and then coming up with the risk assessment is far more accurate than what Purview is able to do in the limited scope from a data boundary as well as from a risk assessment point of view that it has the intelligence to do.